Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets, or of course, you can subscribe to this channel. As you can see today, we have a very, very special guest. Not just a guy who really knows his boxing, but he's a brilliant man as well. G-Man, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on.
I mean, you don't need any introduction among my subscribers, I'm sure, but I always like to do the plugging at the beginning of a video as well as at the end. So do you just want to tell everybody, a bit about yourself before we get into the questions?
Yeah, sure. So as Chris said, I make my own videos. I do a bit similar to what Chris does. Chris would be a lot more technical in terms of his breakdown than I would be. I try and kind of appeal to kind of all audience. I talk about all things boxing, whether it's kind of grassroots to the big fights. I do breakdowns, I do career reviews, and I also do interviews with fighters as well. So that's I kind of try and do a bit of everything in boxing. And, as Chris is saying in intros, I think I have the best intro in boxing. I got to tell you, I'm doing my intros.
Yeah, you do indeed. Do you want to repeat it for them? Go on, give us a little taster. Go on, G-Man.
The first thing you get when you click on my videos, you either get shout out to GMAN Boxing, where's the piss bottle? Or you get a GMAN Boxing donate, and he's got the bag, any.
The famous G-Man intro. So let's talk boxing, my friend. And first and foremost, let's get right into the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about Rolando Romero, Rolly, and his essential ban, really, from being allowed to fight Tank Davis. I wanted to get your views on this. Is it fair? Have they done the right thing? What's your take on this?
It's a tricky situation because bear in mind, these are allegations. A lot of people are throwing the whip at him already saying you're guilty. The way the world is nowadays, it's hard to tell whether someone is has done nothing or whether he's done something. Obviously, if he has done it, because again, bear in mind, they're allegations, right? I believe in innocent until proven guilty. If he has done it, then he's going to face consequences, definitely. And they were definitely right to do it. At this time, it's still it's so early. You kind of wonder, did they overreact, maybe pulling them out? I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm someone who does believe in innocent until proven guilty. And until we have a definitive, he did it. It's a tricky one. I can kind of see where Steven Espinoza was coming from when he did. Maybe it's the fact that he just doesn't want Rolly to be associated with it because he doesn't want to be bringing down any heat on the show. Not necessarily that he thinks he's guilty, that he just wants to be able to say, like, look, this show's going ahead. We don't want any negative publicity on it. It's a really tricky situation. Like I said, at the minute, it's allegations. So we can't say he's definitely innocent or he's definitely guilty. We don't know.
What's your view, though, in regards to a lot of fans have been saying on social media, well, there's an inconsistency here because somebody like Tank Davis was very allegedly heavy-handed with his own girlfriend, and he didn't face such consequences. You've had numerous other fighters in the past who have had similar allegations, and they've been allowed to pursue careers. And in some regards, it's actually helped build their career because it's provided notoriety. And I'm not suggesting that that's the route any of us want to go down. But I'm just wondering if you think that people should be looking at this and saying there's been no precedent of this in the past. Why is it happening now? Or whether you think that you can understand in this modern age, like you're saying, there's a bit of a cancel culture now, whether you think Espinoza's hands were tied.
It's a tricky one. You're right there when you say there's not consistency, but certainly for me, what I've seen just over the last 2 years, there was a cancel culture before then, but now it seems like it's next level. It seems as though we have people who just expressing a view, imagine me and you expressing different opinions. They'd be saying, get him off. We don't want him. That's how bad it's got these days. At the time, Tank Davis was on the rise, and I'm just going to say maybe they saw a couple of zeros with him fighting, which they don't see with Rowley. And I think that might have been one of the reasons why he was allowed to continue, with the allegations that were over him at the time, because I think they might look at Rowley and think, yeah, you're allowed, but we're not going to make any money off you. So what's the point in risking our necks, putting you on, bringing all this publicity down on us, where at the end of the day, what are you really going to do in the long run? With Tank Davis, we look at someone, we have a potential star here. We're going to keep him going no matter what, unless we absolutely have to.
See, I think one of the key things you've hit the nail on the head with here is the fact that, not all sort of laws are applied equally, I guess you could say. And the truth is we do supposedly live in a democratic society where you are innocent until proven guilty. And that's a central tenet of society. And the way I see it personally is that this is unfair and also short-sighted for multiple reasons. First and foremost, let's say for argument's sake, he's innocent. You have then taken away this man's opportunity to earn a living and pursue his dreams for an allegation that may not be true. Okay, this is just for argument's sake. And what happens in this regard is that you give somebody the power to essentially ruin your life or your career with a sheer allegation, regardless of whether there's truth to it. So we're going down a dangerous path. Now, if he is then later found to be guilty, a lot of people will say, but he would have made a lot of money. Well, he would have made a lot of money. But then, as far as I'm aware, apart from a criminal court, he could then be taken to a civil court, and having made more money as a result of fighting against a guy like Tank, he would have to pay his victims potentially more compensation as well. Mm-hmm. So whichever way you look at it, I personally don't see, apart from, I don't want to use the word of virtue signaling, because they are very serious allegations, and if they're true, justice has to be, justice has to be carried out. Nobody's defending him if there's an injustice. But from what I've been led to understand, and I might be wrong, these are very old allegations that have come up now, just before his big fight. There has to be an element of due process, fair due process and diligence. So, yeah, I do feel like an injustice is being done a little bit here. That's my take on it. It seems to be like you agree on it.
It's another thing as well. Like, even if, we'll say, fast forward however long, and he is found innocent, there's an old expression, mud sticks. So even moving forward, that's always going to hang over him. Even if the judge of the High Court finds him, no, Rolly, you're innocent, that'll always be something that will follow him, even though he's been innocent. You know the way people are. Anything that they can use to, hit you over the head with, they'll do. Even if you weren't found guilty, it's there. It's there. It's part of your history. People will use that against you. It's just going to happen.
Yeah, it's true. And, obviously these sorts of allegations, like you're saying, it's not mud sticks, but it's the sort of mud as well that can affect relationships, friendships, familial relationships. You could have a situation where you have a cousin or something. He says, yeah, I think he's innocent, but I'm not going to leave him alone with my daughter, for instance. So it's something that can really affect the rest of your life. And like I said, if he's guilty, then obviously our sympathies have to go to the victims, and they should throw the book at the guy. But until he goes through that due process, I just feel as though this to me, it stinks of something akin to virtue signaling. But anyway, we'll move on from Tank and Rolly, and hopefully it gets resolved soon in one way or another, in a just way. The other question I wanted to ask you is this whole question of Bridgerweight. I know a lot of people are against Bridgerweight. I've been one of those people that I'm not 100% for it. But if it is to come about, what do you think they need to do to make it a success?
It's tricky, because I'm like you, one of the people who is against it. I've been against it from the get-go, and I thought even to the name was a way of virtue signaling. I mean, I'm not sure if you're aware how they got the name.
Was it a boy who had...
It was a boy who was attacked by a dog. I think it was attacked by a dog or something. I think it was something in around that. I think it was something to do with a dog attack, as far as I remember. And I was kind of like, look, the boy is, thankfully okay. But again, it's another way of Sullivan, because he loves virtue signaling, he does. And I just think that it's something that we don't need. No one asked for another division of boxing. I mean, it's crazy when you consider that the Bridgerweight world champion weighed more than the heavyweight champion of the world, Alexander Usyk. I mean, I think Oscar Rivas was 222, 223. Usyk was 220. It's just, to me, it's just laughable that you have the heavyweight champion weighing less than the Bridgerweight champion. It's just crazy to me. And I think that the Rivas had to fight, I think, was it a cruiserweight who was something like 20 pounds lighter? And I think they said the reason for that was that we wouldn't see weight discrepancies. We're seeing it now. I just don't know what I can't understand how they could make this work. I really can't, especially if the other sanctioned bodies aren't following suit.
I'm just going to argue the opposing argument for the sake of it, playing devil's advocate, so to speak, even though I do agree with you. What about the question, though, of the level of discrepancy of weight? If you see a guy like Tyson Fury, if he is going to fight a much smaller guy, what does that massive discrepancy make it unfair? Are we seeing such a vast gap that they needed something to plug? So Rivas being 20 pounds heavier is one thing, but when you start to be 40 pounds heavier, is it another thing? Or do you not think that's the case?
Well, I think that's always been like a case with heavyweight division. I mean, it's been the heavyweight division is known where the big boys go. I mean, bear in mind, how long was it? Was it only the 1980s where it was light heavy to heavy? So you would have had some people, I mean, I think at the days of Primo Carnera, you would have had guys weighing 180 pounds to him weighing 260 pounds. I think Tommy Loughran was, what, 80 pounds lighter than Primo Carnera when he fought? So it's always been an issue in boxing, the weight discrepancies from heavyweight. It's not a new thing. There's always been that. There's just wasn't as many big heavyweights back then as there is now. But I think that you need to look at it from both ends. I mean, yes, a 40, 60 pound weight discrepancy is big, but let's not forget these smaller guys have their advantages too. You know, they're a lot faster, they're a lot quicker. And I'm sure many of them, if they believe they can beat like Michael Hunter, I mean, he's a very small heavyweight, but he believes he can beat them. He's happy to go in and give up X amount of weight to maybe fight a Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, and he has advantages too. So I really I see where you're coming from and saying it does get rid of that discrepancy to an extent. I mean, 20 pounds is better than 80. But at the end of the day, there's always been that. It's been known for heavyweight. That's something that's always been there since the days when it was light heavy, too heavy. And I think a lot of fighters are happy to risk that if they think that they can win.
You know, you made a really interesting point there, because I know I was trying to play devil's advocate, but I agree with you to such an extent that I need to just build on a point you made. You mentioned Primo Carnera, and you were talking about how at the time there would have been a massive weight discrepancy. Well, Primo Carnera had an awful lot of losses. He didn't go a career unbeaten.
Yeah.
So one thing I've always said is that what you're ultimately saying, if you're saying you need to reintroduce a new category because these guys cannot compete with, say, Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, is what you're actually saying is that the modern day big men like Fury, like AJ, these sorts of guys are such good movers in comparison to a guy like Primo Carnera that the smaller guys can't compete. In other words, what you're ultimately saying is that boxing has continued to advance. Whether that's your motive or not, what you're saying is that the big guys today are a lot better than the big guys of the past. And so as a result, you need to seek to punish them. But if you do that, what you're ultimately saying, really, if you break it down, is that the smaller heavyweights of the past, who might have been great heavyweights, wouldn't be able to compete with the big heavyweights today. Mm-hmm. So you're changing the very nature of boxing, in a sense, of heavyweight boxing. So I agree with you on this particular issue. With regards to Bridgerweight, though, let's say you were assigned, the WBC called up GMAN tomorrow. They said, GMAN, I want you to come up with a plan. What do you think we need to do to build this? Fair enough, you don't agree with it, but we're hiring you. How do you build up this concept?
It really is a tricky one. I'm just going to say it. The thing that everyone goes for is money. If they could find a cash incentive or something, I'd say you get more people wanting to fight Bridgerweight, which would increase the division. You might see better matches. Because to be fair, and I will call it and say it, I have seen some good fights in Bridgerweight over there in Russia. Evgeny Ramon versus Kudryashov was a great fight. It really was. And that was for, I think, a Bridgerweight eliminator. So there are good fights there. There are genuinely good fights to be had. But it's just, what is the incentive? Like, that's the kind of thing I would say as well. And like, if you're fighting a Bridgerweight, I mean, I remember Evander Holyfield saying this when he was fighting a cruiserweight. I think he said, I saw a purse that was 100 grand. And then I saw a heavyweight purse that was $1 million. And I said, why was that purse $1 million? Because it's a heavyweight. So it's like, when they see like such a big discrepancy in pay as well, it's like, why would I fight Bridgerweight? And all right, I have a chance of winning a title, but I'll get paid this much money for doing all this in a hard fight, or I could fight heavyweight and get this much money.
You know, it's funny because in order to increase the amount of money, you do need to increase the interest. And the problem that they've got is that the cruiserweight division, for a long time, has been a very strong division. The cruiserweight division that Usyk won was stacked. And yet, this problem that you speak of, the fact that it's not called heavyweight and it's not a traditional, a more traditional weight category like light heavyweight, means they struggle to attach that appeal to cruiserweight. So if they've struggled with cruiserweight for so many years, how are they going to go about making it a success at Bridgerweight? That's a problem. For me personally, the way I would look at it is that, first and foremost, you have to get great fights that people want to see. So take Bryant Jennings, for instance. We won't go into why, so we don't trigger any algorithms here. People, I'm sure, will be able to figure out. He essentially wasn't allowed to fight because the hoops he would have had to have jumped through were so unreasonable that he would have been unable to prepare for that fight. But the first fight was such an interesting fight. Jennings building up a big lead. Rivas, is this pocket rocket who can really punch, catching him late on. it's the sort of fight where it makes you think, how would it go a second time? I personally believe Jennings would do enough and hold him off. But
So did I.
there's that question, though, of Rivas. He dropped White. He stopped Jennings. He's always got that shot in him. And that creates interest. So if you've got these great fights going on in the West, in the East, like you spoke about with Kudryashov, you've got these fights going on in the West, it starts to generate interest. And from there, if you've got that interest, you've got that money. And if you've got the money, that's when you're going to be able to price guys like Briedis, perhaps, who wants to leave cruiserweight. Perhaps he's dipped his toes into heavyweight. He's not 100% sure. Maybe Bridgerweight would have been a nice transition for him. Well, then if you have Briedis Jennings, well, now you're starting to get bigger names. You know, Briedis, he might then, you know, call over Gassiev, and it starts to create a bigger interest. The problem I still see, though, is what becomes of cruiserweight. You know,
exactly.
You drain everything from cruiserweight. It just, I don't know. To me, it seems like Bridgerweight's a real problem. You know, I'm sure there's been a lot of I guess you could say, contrast with say other weight divisions which are more traditional. They're easier to build up fights there. Whereas with this, because it's new, I don't see the appetite for it. Apart from your view and my view, in terms of your general followers and people you speak to, do you see that there's an appetite for Bridgerweight, or are the WBC just going a step too far?
No, I don't. I mean, the majority of people I've asked have said, look, we don't really care for this weight division. I think that it's a division that no one asked for, that now no one wants. And another thing I say maybe they could do is they could maybe go to one of their, you know, golden boys like Canelo of the WBC and say, look, we've done so much for you. Could you put one of our Bridgerweight fights on your undercard? Because it's a Canelo fight. Maybe you'll get more eyes on it that way. They could sell it like that, because I can't really think of, I mean, you're trying to draw something to maybe the casual and the hardcore. The hardcore, no, this division just come from nowhere. The casuals probably be like, Bridgerweight, another division? What's this? It just, to me, it's just, it's created a problem. It's not solved one. It's just created another one.
I agree with you. Okay, let's move on to the next question I wanted to ask you about. Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua, something that's always going to raise the interest, I believe, of people. Everyone's got an opinion on this. AJ has been in the United States, seemingly auditioning a whole bunch of trainers from around the world. Usyk was recently told about this, and Usyk just gave a wry smile. What do you think Usyk's approach will be to hearing that AJ may be changing things up? Will it make him think, oh, okay, there's going to be a difference here, an unknown, because I'm going to have to face something that, it's one thing that I've been able to study AJ all this time. I might get a different type of AJ now. Or is he going to be looking at this and thinking, you know what, this willingness to change styles, you look for a new trainer, it just shows an insecurity in Anthony Joshua. How do you think Usyk will be interpreting this?
I'm just going to be frank. I don't think Usyk will be losing sleep over Anthony Joshua, looking for a new trainer or potentially looking to change style. Usyk is tremendously experienced. If we do get a slightly different AJ, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe in the first round or two, he gives it up and just has a look, assesses what he sees in front of him. If AJ decides I'm going to be hyper aggressive or I'm going to be extremely late, he might, because Usyk's been there, seen it and done it. He's seen different styles. He's seen different size men's dimensions, etc. He might take a look for a round or two. It might not be as early success as we saw in the first fight, and he might just say, okay, I'll have a look at AJ for a round or two. But I don't think AJ can bring anything that will really shock him. I think that if he's training with some of the trainers over there in America, he may know, okay, well, this trainer tends to teach this style. Oh, I know about this style. For example, we'll say, play devil's advocate and say Virgil Hunter. Virgil Hunter is very good at teaching fighters to fight on the inside. Oh, he's going to have more insight. Well, I know how to block. Whenever AJ brought it to the inside with the uppercuts, I knew where to put my arms. I knew how to move back. So I think Usyk is just that experienced and that strong mentally that whatever AJ does in the rematch, I think he'd have an answer for. I really do. I just can't see how Alexander Usyk does not win this rematch unless he just really decides to just do something extremely stupid and go in for AJ when he's fresh and get counted or something like that. I can't see. It's weird because with Ruiz, when he lost that fight, immediately I could look at the rematch before it even started and thought, AJ wants to win, this is what he needs to do. And I could see it from the get-go, this is what he needs to do to win. With Usyk, I've watched it several times, I'm just like, what do you do differently? Like, what can you physically do differently to win this fight? I personally can't see it.
So you, in a way, you think that despite the magnitude of the fight, regardless of what AJ does, it's actually a foregone conclusion. You feel like it's in the bag for Usyk.
I really do. I just, when I looked at AJ in that first fight, and AJ's been saying, as we saw in that interview, you know, I'm not going to swear what he was saying, but he was saying, you know, I'm going for war. I'm going to break his heart. That could be misdirection, potentially. But if AJ does decide to go full blown, you know, macho, pack on muscle, how long before A, he gets tired, and A, before he takes a shot and he doesn't like it? And then, because bear in mind, he's kind of, I think, coming from a place of bravado, and is maybe thinking, all right, I lost, my pride's a bit dented. I still don't think he's over the Ruiz fight. If he gets in there and he gets hurt again, will the demons come back, as I think they kind of did potentially in the 12th round? And will he just decide, you know what, I'm after making a big mistake here, I shouldn't have even, because the way he's been talking about people saying, oh, I shouldn't have took the rematch, people in boxing circles, almost kind of angry for suggesting he shouldn't have took the rematch. I think that, I know there's some red flags there, I think, with Anthony Joshua. Part of me thinks maybe he's reading too much into this, and maybe he's overthinking the fight itself before it's even happened. Whereas Usyk is just, he can say all this, I know what he's going to do, I know what I need to do, I've seen it all before, and I'll just, if he does do anything different, I can adjust.
Is it the job, though, of his team to protect AJ in that regard if they think he'll lose again? Because surely the fighter, at least mentally, has to think to himself, I want the rematch immediately. Otherwise, if he doesn't, what he's ultimately accepting mentally is that he's not good enough currently to beat Usyk. So surely the fighter needs to believe in his own ability at this present moment in time. And if he's not ready to go for the immediate rematch, then surely that's the people around him that need to tell him, AJ, chill, man, we need to work on a couple of things. What's your opinion on that?
It's a strange one. Like, I mean, if he stays with Rob McCracken, right? Rob McCracken, I think at this stage is just, he's not right for AJ, in my opinion. And I think that Rob McCracken is looking at AJ and thinking, I'm eating thanks to you. And potentially he might look at AJ and think, you know what, if I tell him he's not going to, maybe he shouldn't take the rematch, maybe he'll start to doubt me as a trainer. Well, if you don't think I'll win it, do you not have faith in me? And then it might be the thing that the straw that breaks the camel's back, and AJ might say, right, bye-bye. So maybe he's thinking of his own career, thinking, I need to stay in this team for some capacity because I'm making more money with AJ than I ever did with anyone else. So potentially maybe there's a case if he doesn't want to say it, he doesn't want to upset the apple cart.
It's interesting that you bring that point up, because even when it came to Malick Scott taking on Deontay Wilder, and I feel like he's done a really good job. What would it be like if Wilder was getting a proper shellacking? Would the trainer be willing to pull him out? Or would he be more concerned about the backlash that he would get based on what occurred with Breland, and the fact that that backlash could essentially end his career prospects before they've begun? Because once you get a reputation in the sport that you are, you know, like you were saying earlier, mud sticks. Once you get a reputation that maybe you're a bit dodgy, which might have been the accusation, and you don't have your fighter's best interest at heart, it might be difficult to then build a career when you're not already an established trainer. So what you've touched upon there, I guess, is something that a lot of trainers face that is not often spoken about. This idea of, look, I do need to look out for my fighter's best interest at heart, but at the same time, I've also got to consider the fact that I've got a career and a reputation of my own. And so, trainer has to face a whole bunch of obstacles that we don't necessarily think about.
Yeah, like it's a good example would be Freddie Roach and Eddie Futch. Eddie Futch told Freddie Roach, call it in, pack it in. And that was, now Eddie Futch was established. And obviously Freddie Roach was not at a massive level as a fighter. But he was like, well, you know, my best, I'm leaving you. And he looks back and says, I should have listened to him. Because a lot of these fighters have egos, and they might look at a trainer and think, I'm putting my career in your hands. You're helping me. You're training. You're telling me basically that I'm not. They mightn't say it in words like that. That look, you don't need to fight him now. AJ might interpret it. Is that you saying I'm not good enough? Is that you saying that I can't beat Usyk? Is that you saying wait a year? I'm not. You don't know what way they'd interpret it, because fighters can interpret it certain ways.
And you're right as well about the ego playing a big role. This fighter shall remain nameless, right? But I was once having a conversation with a professional fighter who is not a friend of mine, but was a friend of a friend. And he was a puncher, and he was starting out his career at the time. And he was putting people over in sparring. He had a good knockout ratio early in his career. And somebody said to him, you're a little bit small for this particular weight category. I'm going to give away as little as I can here. You're a bit small for this particular weight category. but you've piled on a lot of muscle. Shouldn't you drop down a weight division? And his argument, because you're short, they were saying to him, for that weight category, you're going to struggle to close the distance consistently. And his argument was, once they get hit, it doesn't matter. They're going to feel this power. And I said to him, listen, you're going to have a problem in the sense that if you're solely reliant on power, you're going to come up across somebody who can take your power. And then you better have a plan B and C. And that mere comment, and G-Man, you know me, man. I'm not a hater. I wasn't coming from.
No,
at the end of the day, I wasn't a fighter that was competing with this dude in the same division or anything like that. What did I possibly have to hate on? It was just a word of advice, because I could see he'd fallen in love with his punching power way too much. And he didn't like that I made this comment. And yeah, I remember it was almost as though I'd undermined him, which I hadn't even done that. I said, listen, you've got a great weapon there. You're a big puncher for sure. But you need to develop other skills other than just the ability to lay someone out. And so one of the things that these fighters who are, listen, I'm not against fighters in any way. They're special characters. We know that. But a lot of the times, there are certain things that will rub them up the wrong way. If you make a prediction, for instance, and you pick against the fighter, you might really want that fighter to win. He will take it personally, though. If you say and say, I don't think this is the right fight for you, you don't get that in football. You might be an Arsenal fan saying you think Arsenal will lose away at Bayern Munich. The Arsenal players aren't going to be upset. But in boxing, I guess because it's such a sport of machismo, that it does affect them. And so knowing the ego of your fighter you're training, even as a trainer, not just a fan or a friend, must be a difficult thing to try and juggle if you're a trainer.
Oh, it has to be. And it's a good point you touched on there about mentioning, like, if you know a fighter or if you know of a fighter, but you happen to be speaking to them, how easily offset they are. When I used to train in a pro gym, I made a note to never speak. If any of the fighters were ever on Sky or anything like that, I was like, I'm never going to speak on it, because if I don't think they'll win, I knew what was going to happen. I knew it would be, do you not like me? Do you not? So I made sure any fighter I ever know, like from an even remotely personal level that I might be seeing, never talk. Because I know it might not even be anything bad you're saying. It might be, oh, that fighter maybe is a bit too small for his weight. Maybe he should drop down. What do you mean I'm too small? And it's just little things. And you'd be surprised how ego-driven some fighters are about any little bit of criticism they get.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, Tyson Fury obviously has made the offer to train AJ. We all, I don't think any of us took that too seriously. AJ, I actually really liked his response. AJ said he'd be happy to do it. A lot of fighters used to mix with each other, and he added the little thing in there that, listen, at the end of the day, it might be the best way to get him in the ring. I like the psychology of that. He was throwing a little dig, throwing some shade back at Fury there. But one of the things, apparently yesterday or the day before, Team Fury, I think it was his father, John, have thrown the idea back out there again. Let's just say, for argument's sake, AJ decided to call their bluff, and he went down to have a little session with them. How do you think Usyk would interpret that? Not so much AJ and Fury themselves. I'm sure they'd be scouting each other. We pretty much know it would probably be a very, very hard spar with neither given a quarter. Or maybe they both go soft just to try and look at what the other one's got. We'll leave that to the side. But in terms of Usyk himself, let's say, for argument's sake, he saw AJ working with Fury or Team Fury. How do you think he would interpret that?
I don't even know how I'd interpret seeing the two of them work together, to be honest. It's just such a weird image. I mean, I don't think I could envision that. Maybe he'd be thinking, to be honest with you, if I was Alexander Usyk, I'd be more worried about what AJ would be telling Fury about him. Because if you're Alexander Usyk, you're expecting to get through AJ and potentially fight Fury next. I'd be looking at him going, I hope he doesn't tell him any little things he picked up about me in the ring that he might then use against me if we ever fight.
That's interesting.
That's what I would be thinking.
If I was Usyk, I would have been loving it. I would have been thinking, these lot are so shook. They're so panicky. They will come together to try and overthrow me. That's how I'd see it. They want me out the way. They see me as too much of a threat. So what he's trying to do is help him beat me in the hope that them two can then later get it on, because Fury doesn't believe he can beat me. That's how I would have interpreted it. I'm not taking any of the offer seriously, but I just thought it was a little idea to toy with there. The next question I wanted to ask you, G-Man, was about Caleb Plant and Canelo Alvarez. Obviously a big fight coming up. We've already seen their little altercation occur at that press conference. Steve Bunce a couple of weeks ago was talking about that video that occurred with Caleb Plant, whereby for those of you that might not have seen it, he was having a fight with someone in the street. This was before he became a famous fighter, but he was I believe, a Golden Gloves winner, a national amateur champion. And he was basically jabbing this guy. He wasn't really looking to hurt him. He kept saying, look, I don't want to fight. But he was jabbing and moving. And then this guy, it looked like quite a hard, rough sort of area. It looked like it was in the projects. And at one point, the guy pulls out a knife, and Caleb Plant, and I believe it's Plant's brother, it might have been his friend, they ran away. Obviously, someone's pulled a knife, you're not going to stick around.
Of course.
So Bumps raised the question of, does this, product of his environment, so to speak, this kid who grew up in the hood, does it prepare him mentally for the obstacle against Canelo Alvarez? Will he look at this and think, I've, faced guys that might not be as good boxers as you, of course, but I've faced guys that have been more dangerous than you. If you're talking about the situation, I've been in more dangerous situations, so I'm not overawed. Or do you think that these are just little embellishments that they put on there to try and sell the fight?
I genuinely think that they're little more embellishments, to be honest with you. I mean, I think it's a story to tell and to say this is what he's been through, just to kind of get close to the fight. I think come off fight night, I think that counts for precious little, to be 100% honest, in the ring against someone like, especially like Canelo. I think that is just a little caveat he can add to the story of Caleb Plant. In terms of whether it doesn't, I don't see that making the blind bait. I think the minute they get in the ring, it's fight night. It's not going to make a blind bit difference. I personally don't believe.
I agree with you, to be honest. It's just that a lot of people I've been seeing on Twitter lately have been talking about this as well. Caleb Plant's real. He comes from a tough area. And, I wanted to raise it with you because it seems to be that a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on this idea. Too much emphasis, in my opinion, on where you're from and who you hang out with. But there are some fantastic analysts, of course, like Hatman, for instance, who feels that Anthony Joshua should be around more people like the ones he came up with, that more atmosphere more, because it sharpens that mentality. So I also understand that point of view. But ultimately, I believe, like you, and you said, especially not against Alexander Usyk, I believe that it might work against some people because maybe they'll feel intimidation. They'll, maybe they think like you. And so they think, this guy's real, he's hard, he's whatever. But then there are other people who are just nothing bothered. At the end of the day, we're in a boxing ring, right? So it was interesting. I wanted to toy with the idea with you because I wanted to see what you made of it. In terms of Caleb Plant, do you think that he will, obviously he's never been in the ring with somebody quite as good as Canelo. I think that's a given, we can accept that. Do you think he will see himself deep down as the best opponent Canelo has ever faced?
That's
not asking if he is the best, but do you believe he believes that he's the best? Does he believe he's better than Golovkin? Does he believe he's better than Jacobs and Billy Joe Saunders and Cotto? Or do you think deep down he knows that he's got a mountain to climb here? How do you
if I was him,
psychology?
If I was him, I would believe, yes, no, I am the best. People may say, this is just the way I would look at it. People may say, I haven't fought anyone. Well, I'm fighting Canelo. And Canelo has fought this. Well, he's not fought me. I would have that mentality because if you go in and think, okay, I'm the best person now, but bear in mind, this guy fought Cotto years ago. No. I remember in any sport, you need to believe you're superior. I mean, I remember listening to an interview with a darts player a couple of years ago, and he was a big Michael van Gerwen fan. And he remember playing him at an event, which was like money on the line, ranking. And he said, before you do it, can you sign my darts? I was like, you've lost that before you've even done it. You want your opponent to sign your darts? Get the hell out of here. You're not going to win.
Or is that mind games? Does it make the opponent think this guy's nothing and deep down, that's your, because a lot of people accuse Ruiz of doing that to AJ, right? Pretending to be a fan, can I hold your belt, champ, and all that. And really, he's planning his demise. Is that possible too? That it's just mind games?
Possibly. Well, that occasion it wasn't. That was a genuine fan losing it.
Like,
oh my God, he was in awe. And that was the thing I used to not like about Floyd Mayweather. Not him personally, but people like Devin Alexander, who was at the time a world level fighter. He was in awe of Floyd. It's like, Devin, this is a guy in your division. You should be looking to take his head off. Don't be in awe of him. And that's why I liked Errol Spence, because Errol Spence was, I think, a 2-0, 3-0 pro. And straight away he was like, I'm putting you in your place. And that's what you need. I think that's the mentality. You need that hunter's mentality. you need to have that mentality. Like in Ruiz's case, it worked very well. It really did. He really sang AJ to sleep. But I'm someone who believes in, I've always believe in, no matter what he's done, you have to believe you're superior. Because if you let someone's reputation get the better of you mentally before you've got in the ring, you're finished.
Well, one thing I would say about Caleb Plant, he does not seem to have that about him, does he? He does not seem like he's in awe of Canelo at all. He genuinely believes he's a very skilled fighter. A number of years ago when he first broke onto the scene, I was basically, you know how sometimes I'll mention these prospects and I'll say, look out for this guy, look out for that guy. Caleb Plant was a guy that I really expected to go to the top of the sport. So I do rate him. But you touched upon something a moment ago. You were talking about how, you know, who have I fought thus far when I'm fighting Canelo and, you know, he's never fought anyone like me. I do wonder whether that big jump from where he's been operating to Canelo is a step too far. You know, I would have liked to have seen him fight some other top level fighters first. I do think he makes some real errors, which I will talk about in a breakdown video. And I think there will be, I think Canelo will take advantage of those. But nonetheless, in terms of self-belief, I do believe that it's genuine. I do think that he really feels like he's going to win this fight and that he's coming to win.
Interesting what you touched on. I 100% agree with you in a sense of he does believe it, but like you, go from Truax's, who's cats guys, to Canelo. That's such a massive jump, and the mistakes he was making against them, he just cannot do it against Canelo. You know, you can get away with, you know, being a bit flat-footed against his cast guy at times, and he can pin you up against the ropes. It's not all right, but you can get away with it against guys like that. You can get away without making a few adjustments to an angle of a right hand that Truax is throwing. You can't do that against Canelo. You need to be as near as perfect as you can be. So those little flaws that you make at that level, you can't do them at this level at all. I mean, as Billy Joe Saunders said, it was dipping low into an uppercut was the difference between losing. That literally lost him to fight. One little mistake.
But you see,
went into an uppercut.
This is the problem with when you're fighting a guy like Canelo. Billy was making that move consistently. So though he got away with it a lot, he's giving Canelo something to capitalize on. So he got caught with it once. And listen, to an extent, it's lucky because, listen, it's not a lucky punch. Don't get me wrong. I don't want people misquoting me or misunderstanding me. But the amount of times that you're going to land that punch and it's going to cause that sort of alleged damage is limited, right? It's kind of like a cut, like a Lennox Lewis and Vitaly Klitschko. How many times is that punch going to cause that type of cut? So from that regard, it's unlucky. But he gave Canelo the opportunity to be able to find that shot. And this is a problem when you're up against a guy like Canelo. He's so good at finding these openings and working these openings that when you are making these sorts of errors against Truax, like you're saying, the scatter guy, when you then face Canelo, what you get away with in the past, you're not getting away with now. Even if you get away with it once, twice, three times, the fourth time, you're not getting away with it. And this is the problem that he's going to face. But he does have the belief, and he does have some really good skills. He does. So it will be interesting to see. There is a size difference as well. Not that has hindered Canelo in the past, but it's interesting. There is an interesting element to this fight. But weirdly, I'm more excited about Crawford Porter. I don't know how you feel.
So am I.
Yeah.
So am I.
And why is that? It's not the bigger fight. It's more the fact that you probably think that there's a way in which Porter can win this fight.
Of course. I think that as well.
Yeah. And with Plant, don't get me wrong, if the stars align, so to speak, as the phrase goes, he has got some good skills, but I would be very surprised. With Porter, it would be an upset, and I think Bud is a superb fighter, one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the world. But styles make fights, and, you know, Porter could give him some problems.
He definitely could.
I think Crawford wins the fight, but it's a more exciting spectacle to me, personally. Do you see what I'm saying? So
I think there's something I want to touch on that Hatman said about Duran Boots Ennis, is he said in his post-fight of his recent fight against Delorme, people might think I'm nitpicking. Well, it's those nitpicks that actually make the difference at this level. When you're facing someone like a Canelo, you might think, oh, he's only doing this, leave it be. No, only maybe moving your head down a bit too low, only staying in the pocket half a second too long. That might not be anything if you're facing the Jose's cast guy, Caleb Truax. Against Canelo, that could be the difference between getting hit and not getting hit.
Right. And the thing is, something that I've always said as well, I always try and make a point of the fact that I'm looking for perfection. So I don't want people to assume that I'm hating on a guy when I'm saying this is an error here and error there. But what you're seeking to do, the way my sort of mind works when I'm trying to analyze, I look at perfection and I think, right, this deviates from that. That's a problem. That's a problem. That's a problem. Eventually, when you start to eradicate those problems, you become a better fighter. Another pro fighter, not the one I was talking about earlier, but another pro fighter who shall also remain nameless, who I was talking to one time a number of years ago, we were discussing his career. And I said, listen, the first thing you need to do is ask yourself, if you faced a clone of yourself, how would you beat you? And then you need to learn how to plug those gaps. So you're right, we nitpick, but we do it because we are observing fighters operating at an elite level. So you have to nitpick. It's not hating, it's just the reality of what you have to do. And when you are nitpicking, yeah, I think Canelo will come through it. But I do like the psychology of Caleb Plant. He does believe in himself. And I do believe that he believes in himself.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that, that adds a
belief
nice
is real. Belief is
real.
definitely where you can see it straight away.
And you need that.
You can
if there is going to be
it.
an upset, you need that. Well, G-Man, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close up?
Just a big thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure as always. It's delighted to come on the channel. It's the first time I've been on it. And the topics were brilliant, I have to say. I enjoy talking about them.
So thank you very much for being here. For those of you that haven't checked it out, you have to check out G-Man's channel. The content is consistent. It's all the time. If you want to keep up with boxing, it's a great way of doing it. He will always be there on the ball, and he's a great guy too. So thank you very much, G-Man, for appearing, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you everyone for watching as well.
Thank you for tuning in. Take care. God bless.